With our feather all cut to shape, all of the serrations in there, we now need to stiffen it and give it the 3-dimension we want it to have. The product that I'm going to use is called Blockout. It is an acrylic finish for leather that dries with a matte finish, which works very well for this project since we're going to be painting it. We're going to begin by putting a very liberal coat on both sides of this feather. We want to make sure that it's to the point of saturation almost. But make sure that you get it everywhere. Put lots of it on. And we're going to do this on both sides. With this feather saturated with Blockout, now as it starts to dry, we will shape it. And it will allow it to dry in this shape, which gives it some rigidity. I want to make sure we separate all of these loose ends down here. You'll notice that I first of all began by bending it a little bit right along the quill so that we have a little bit of a bow to it. Now we'll make these stand up. These edges here, we need to get some twists and turns in it. We want it to look like this bird that this came off of had a bad hair day. You want to do this fairly quickly while it's still wet, and then you need to set it aside and let it dry. I'd like to show you another way to do a feather now. This time we're going to leave it actually attached to the leather, but we're going to make it stand out with the same sort of 3-dimension you've seen already. With this type of feather, we're doing it on some heavier leather, something about 8-9 ounce in weight. Because we're working with heavier leather, we can cut the design in a little more deeply than we did with the other feathers. But again, we're going to follow all the lines, cut them very carefully, especially when we're doing this. Once your design is cut into the leather, we will begin once again by using the diagonal bevelers along both sides of the quill. And again, we'll use a bit more force with the mallet so that we get really good depth with the design. As with the other type of feather, again we will want to use the modeling spoon to round off the quill so that we get a nice domed effect. And then again, as with the other feathers, we'll use the hair blade and we'll put that feather texture on there, and once again we'll run this texture just past the line. Once you have the texture on your feather all the way around, we'll take a beveler. You can just use the beveler of your choice, and we're going to bevel this entire outline into the leather. And I'm going to bevel fairly deep. In fact, I'm going to bevel all the way around these fuzzy quills here at the bottom, just like there was a solid line. You don't have to be overly careful about how smooth your beveling is. At this point, we'll come back and clean that up with another step. But be sure to bevel with some pretty good depth right now. Once you've beveled completely around your feather with good depth, we now need to mat around that. We need to feather that beveling out a little bit, and we're going to use a matting tool. The one that we have here is number F901, and it's a very flat tool. It has a square side on it, and it's used for just putting a texture there, but what I'm using it for is to flatten the leather waist so that the feather is left standing up. This tool is used pretty much straight up and down, and it does leave a neat texture there, but the point of this is to flatten the leather down. Now that we've matted all the way around this design, we have lowered the leather so that we can now undercut this feather. We're going to take the craft knife again, But this time, instead of cutting all the way through it, we're going to come at a very flat angle and we're going to cut just underneath the surface of the leather. I'm holding it at a very flat angle, and we'll take a couple of passes here and see about getting some lift on this. We're going to use this all the way around up to the quill. Now we're not going to try to cut all the way to the quill. We're just going to make it look like it's cut that far. Once we get underneath there, you can see that now with this leather moist like this, it actually is going to stretch up. We can make this stand out, and we're going to be doing this all the way around this piece of leather. Now that we've cut all the way around this feather, you can see that the edges, I've curled them up a little bit to show what we're trying to do. Now we need to go ahead and give this feather the same kind of character we did the others, and we'll do that now by separating out all of these rough ends down here at the bottom, and we'll do it the same way. We're making sure we don't cut all the way through the leather though. We're just cutting down as deeply as we undercut. When we stiffen these, we'll make all of these stand out just like we did the other. And we'll go ahead and put some of these character lines along the edge that we can turn up. We've cut underneath this feather all the way around, and you can see with those tears in the leather there, we can turn up the edges just like we did on the three-dimensional version. I'm now going to take and roll these edges out of the way, and I'm going to take a background tool, and I'm just using the A104 background tool, probably the one that came with my beginner set. And I'm adding a texture on the leather underneath where I cut. As I work out from underneath there, I'm feathering out the impressions so that they gradually get lighter and lighter. And then I'm going to use a tool. This one is number E294. It has a very coarse, irregular texture to it. Works really good for transitioning this texture here. And we'll use that for the background to help set off this design. Notice as I'm using this tool that I actually rotate it a little bit between each tap. The purpose for this is to make sure we do get a random texture. We don't want to have any kind of a pattern showing up here. And once again, you can see I'm feathering it out so that it gradually disappears. So we'll do this all the way around this design and to help set it off. We've now used the matting tool all the way around this project, and you can see how the contrast of textures helps to bring out the feather even more. But we need to go ahead and finish this up and turn it into a picture, and we're going to put a little tuft of a feather out here at the end, make it look like it was kind of stuck on the end here. We'll take the swivel knife and we'll put a little quill here. We'll put a little bend in it too. Then we need to add some texture that looks like a feather. And if you're looking really close, you see that I'm doing one of those things you're never supposed to do. I'm undercutting. I actually have the swivel knife leaning to the side a little bit so that it actually undercuts the leather. And it actually lifts it up. It makes it look like it's beveled on one side a little bit. And that's really all I want to do with this. It's just give the appearance of it being the suggestion of a feather. So we get a little feather on the end here, and then let's see, sometimes there'll be a few strings that'll hang off of something like this. So we'll go ahead and put those on there as well, and those are done with just the swivel knife. Now we need to let this dry out, and our next step, we will stiffen this feather just like we did the other three-dimensional feathers. Of course, the final touch with any picture is to make sure that you put a signature on your work. And so right down here we've got a space that we've got some room for, and I'm going to just take a pencil first to make a tracing pattern. Well, as you can see, our feather is all dried out. It's got some real character to it. The edges looks like it's been out in the wind a little bit. It's really starting to develop a real cool look. What we need to do next is we need to put a wire on the back of it to stiffen it, to help it hold its shape. And to do that, we're going to put a wire up the back. And you can use anything like a coat hanger, just a cheap coat hanger wire. I've got a piece of wire here that I'm going to use that is already cut to the length. And you'll notice I've already curved it a little bit because where we're going to put it on the back, we want it to fit into that little groove that we made when we embossed that quill in the back. So for this, and then once we have the wire on there, we're going to need to put a covering over it so that the wire isn't showing. So I'm going to just take a piece of pigskin, a real light lining leather like this. That's natural color. I've already cut a strip of it off that we will use to cover over that wire. And all of that is going to be held in place with some contact cement. So the next thing we do is get the contact cement on the back of the feather. We just need to put it where the wire is going to go. And it just takes a light coat there. Put it on the back of the quill. And then we'll do the same with the piece of lining leather, and we'll also put some on the wire itself. Now that we've got contact cement on the back of the feather, on the lining and on the wire, we're going to put all together. We'll lay this wire along the quill. Lay it right in that little groove that we made. And I will take the lining, and we'll start out here at this end up, rather than at the bottom of the quill, we'll start up here at the end of the wire. And we'll lay that so it just kind of centers up. I've cut this piece of leather a little bit wider than the quill, because what I'll do when we get all done is I'll trim it off. Once you got that stuck down, you can take your modeling spoon now and get a real nice tight fit up against the wire. Just turning this over, we'll take our knife and we'll trim off the excess leather. Now, as you can see, our feather has some shape and some contour to it. The edges look really great, but we can actually now, with the wire there, add more 3-dimension to it, and it will hold that. We can bend it to whatever contour we wish, and we're now at the point where this feather is ready to paint.